Not every child is lucky enough to have parents who deserve them, but every tiny being that comes into this world deserves a loving home. This is the touching narrative of a tiny, forgotten, and helpless soul who found the life he was due thanks to the silent decision of a stranger, someone with a heart far more generous than his biological parents. In a small health center in the peaceful Serenity Village, there was a tiny baby who seemed to have no place in the world. A baby who didn't cry, perhaps because he already knew no one would come for him. But when a young and hopeful volunteer stepped in, she unleashed a chain of events no one could have predicted. What did she discover? And what did she do next? I invite you to listen to this true story to the end to find out. Take the opportunity to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and tell us in the comments which corner of the world you're following us from. In the heart of the serene Serenity Village, in the state of Aurora, the corridors of the Aurora Medical Center reverberated with the daily rhythm. At the end of the pediatric wing, a door remained almost always closed. Behind it, in a dimly lit room, rested a tiny, abandoned little boy, in a disturbing and almost imperceptible silence. His real name was a mystery, but the nurses called him the Little Forgotten One. Too fragile to make a sound, his lips were dry, his limbs barely moved, and his eyes, strangely still and deep, seemed to carry a sadness that did not belong to such a small child. He was one of many rejects, babies left behind, with no one to care for them. No one visited him. Isabella Santoro had never set foot in a hospital like that. Young and recently arrived as a volunteer, she entered the Aurora Medical Center with energy and a heart driven by purpose. She sought meaning, a chance to make a difference, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality that awaited her. She was introduced to Chief Nurse Elisa Costa, a firm figure who handed Isabella a list of tasks and a sharp piece of advice. Don't get involved with abandonment cases. It's not your responsibility. However, the word abandonment echoed in Isabella's mind. At the end of her first shift, curiosity propelled her toward that enigmatic door at the end of the corridor. She opened it slowly, and there she saw him, an incredibly tiny baby, clinging to the tip of a thin blanket with fragile little fingers. Isabella knelt beside the crib and whispered, "You are not alone anymore." That night, sleep did not come for Isabella. The image of the baby stayed in her mind, those eyes full of silence and sadness. The next morning, she returned to the hospital earlier and re-entered the little room. The bottle was on the floor, untouched. The blanket piled at his feet. The signs of neglect tightened her heart. Moved by maternal instinct, she brought a sterilized bottle from home, fed him gently, and wiped his little face. For the first time, the baby's eyes followed her movements. In that room, once so dark, something precious began to bloom: hope. Isabella began to dedicate every free minute to the baby, whom she affectionately named Eli. Slowly, a change emerged. His cheeks gained volume, his eyes became more expressive, and he began to move with the awkward curiosity of a developing baby. He smiled, and with each smile, Isabella felt her heart overflow with pure, protective love. But the tranquility didn't last long. One afternoon, passing near the staff room, Isabella caught fragments of a conversation. Dr. Lucas Andrade, head of the department, was speaking with Chief Nurse Elisa Costa. "We need to arrange the transfer of the abandonment cases. Sweet Childhood Home can take them in. We are not a permanent care institution," Dr. Andrade stated. "Some of them might not survive the transfer," Elisa murmured, "especially Eli." Isabella's stomach churned. That same night, she decided to confront them both. "He's finally starting to live. You can't just send him away," she exclaimed, tears of frustration in her eyes. "Isabella, we have protocols to follow," Dr. Andrade replied firmly. "You've already done more than expected." "Not yet," she retorted, her voice choked. "If you don't save him, I will." Isabella returned home and spent the night awake. With fierce determination, she researched adoption laws tirelessly, contacted support organizations, and wrote emails. She found a list of institutions to help children like Eli. The next day, she began a series of phone calls, dozens of times. Some hung up, others claimed it was impossible. But one woman, Mrs. Patricia Gomes, from a nonprofit organization, listened carefully to her story, moved. "Your passion touched me deeply," Patricia said. "Give us a few days. We will do our best to find a family." Isabella clung to these words. Meanwhile, she continued to care for Eli with the same affection and devotion as a mother. She brought toys, clean clothes, warm bottles. She whispered lullabies until he fell asleep, making a promise. "You will never be alone again." 3 days later, the phone rang. "We found a couple," Patricia announced. "They arrive tomorrow." Isabella's hands trembled. She should have been euphoric, but a deep pain squeezed her heart. Saying goodbye to Eli was like tearing a piece of herself away. The next day, a kind man and a gentle woman entered the hospital, Gabriel and Mariana Alves. Isabella watched as they held Eli with reverence. Eli looked at them and then at Isabella, his eyes full of confusion. He only knew her hands, her voice, her warmth. And suddenly there were new faces, different smells, unfamiliar arms. Isabella stepped forward, knelt beside him, and tenderly kissed his cheek. "Be very happy, my little Eli," she whispered, her voice choked. "I know you will be. You deserve the whole world." Carefully, she placed him in Mariana's arms, who welcomed him like a miracle. Gabriel put his arm around his wife, and both waved to Isabella with gratitude. As they turned to leave, Isabella accompanied them to the door. She watched the car drive away, trying to hold back the lump in her throat, a bittersweet mix of joy and sorrow. But tears fell, silent yet overwhelming, as the vehicle disappeared, taking with it a small, precious piece of her heart. The days that followed dragged on. Isabella continued her routine at the hospital, but the world seemed quieter without Eli's presence. His little room was unoccupied, but something had changed profoundly. One night, she received a message from Patricia Gomes. "If there are other children like Eli, we want to and can help." Isabella stared at the message. Suddenly, she noticed the other babies, each forgotten in a crib, with little more than a name on their chart. It was then that she understood that Eli was just one among many, and this realization tore her apart. She couldn't save everyone. This truth weighed on her chest. But maybe, just maybe, she could save some. And that, she concluded, was reason enough to try. Determined and driven by a vibrant emotion, she entered Dr. Lucas Andrade's office with a voluminous binder of research. In it were detailed lists of charity organizations, contacts for adoption agencies, testimonials from families, partnership proposals, and funding requests. Dr. Andrade looked up, surprised. Isabella placed the binder before him and pressed her finger on the cover. "We cannot save everyone," he said after a moment of silence, leafing through the documents. "But perhaps some." Something intangible but powerful began to transform at Aurora Medical Center. A silent wave of compassion and renewal began to permeate every corner of the building. More volunteers joined the cause, bringing new energy, fresh ideas, and a renewed sense of responsibility. Donations began to arrive: blankets, bottles, toys, and even quilted blankets handmade by local church groups. Head nurse Elisa Costa, once the personification of clinical distance, also underwent a remarkable transformation. She stopped considering Isabella naive. Instead, she began to visit the babies regularly, stayed longer after her shift, and sometimes rocked the baby until it fell asleep peacefully before finally going home. The children's ward, once silent and cold, was now filled with soft laughter, lullabies, and the sweet murmur of lives that were no longer forgotten. The atmosphere of the ward became cozier, not just in temperature, but in spirit. One night, Isabella passed by the baby's room and heard a whimper. She picked up a little girl, cradled her gently, and whispered, "It's okay, my little one, you are completely safe." She thought of Eli, not with pain, but with a renewed sense of purpose and gratitude for the journey they had shared. Months later, the hospital boasted a new playroom, an improved referral system to connect children with loving families, and a truly renewed heart. Dr. Andrade walked into the room one day and watched the children playing. "You were right, Isabella," he said. "We can and should do better." Isabella smiled, her heart overflowing with gratitude. That same night, she received a photo in her email. Eli was sitting on a colorful mat, surrounded by toys, with a wide, free smile on his face. His eyes no longer carried the sadness of abandonment. They shone with pure joy and life. Isabella looked at the photo. Warm tears streamed down her face. She went to the hospital courtyard, looked at the twinkling stars in the sky, and whispered, her voice full of hope, "One at a time, we will succeed." And you, if you were in Isabella's shoes, would you have acted the same way? Or perhaps even more? What would you say to parents who abandon their babies so easily? These children deserve every opportunity in life. If they were brought into this world, then it is imperative that these parents take responsibility. Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. We would love to know your heart. Thank you for following our stories.